Welcome to the Gifted Application and Identification Process Parent Guardian Workshop for Grade 1. Our goals are to assist parents and guardians in better understanding how to access the online gifted applications and the procedures for gifted identification once the application is submitted. We're going to look at the 5 steps of this process. So in past years, all first and fifth grade students enrolled in BBCPS were screened on site at their elementary school by an assessment specialist from the Gifted Testing Office sometime between September and December. In the fall of 2020, however, gifted screening was suspended for fifth grade students and adjusted for first grade. The screening instrument is the Naglieri Nonverbal Abilities Test. It is a culture fair test, fair across gender, race, and ethnicity. The instrument uses shapes that are universal in nature. Parents or guardians will have access to their child's screening score. I believe this will happen when all first grade students have received the test. With COVID, it's been a little different this year. We were scheduled to have our first grade screening on December 8th, but we came home before then. I'm sure when we return face-to-face, our face-to-face students, that screening date will be adjusted and we will be rescheduled. And I can also tell you that the Gifted Testing Office is working hard to determine how they are going to provide that screening for our virtual students as well. So parents or guardians of first grade students may apply for gifted services and Old Donation School. Those students that score 90% or above must submit an online application for their child to be further assessed and considered for gifted services. However, parents or guardians, anyone with knowledge of that child, can also submit an online application for students who do not score in the 90th percentile, but wish their child to be considered for gifted services. The deadline for applications is Wednesday, February 10th by 5 o'clock p.m. The application can be accessed at the website giftedapplication.bbcps.com. After the screening, the process, the next step is that process of completing the application. It needs to be initiated by the parent or guardian online. Like I said before, parents, teachers, anyone with knowledge of the child's abilities may refer him or her for additional consideration by the Gifted Identification and Placement Committee, even if that score isn't 90th percentile. The submitted application by the parent begins the next step, and that next step is the teacher portion of it. So parents go online, they complete the application, they hit submit, they select whether or not they want their child considered for Old Donation School or not. I would suggest you go ahead and check that box. If you're considering Old Donation School, you can change your mind later and decline if your child is selected for Old Donation School and you change your mind. But if you change your mind later and want the child considered for Old Donation School, you can't go back and check that box later. So it has to be checked before you submit the application. The teacher also completes a portion of the application, and that portion was revised this year following best practices as recommended by gifted education experts and the National Association for Gifted Children. A new teacher information portion was developed and is being implemented this year. The classroom teacher and the gifted resource teacher collaborate to create a strengths-based narrative about each one of our gifted applicants. The teacher considers traits, attributes, and behaviors that may indicate giftedness, and they give examples of how these are observed. So they're asked to observe and give specific evidence and examples for each one of these areas. So I'm going to flip through these so that you can see the different areas that your child's teacher will be observing and keeping anecdotal notes for this application. Communication and language, cognitive learning, creativity and imagination, social and emotional, motivation. Finally, the last section is interests. Once the application is completed, the next step in the process is testing. First grade students who were screened using the Naglieri in the fall are then given the COGAT, which is a cognitive abilities test by an assessment specialist from the gifted testing office at their school. Parents, guardians are notified of the testing date in advance. The best preparation for testing really is to get a good night's sleep and eat a good breakfast. There isn't any way to really study for this test like in other academic assessments. Information is collected to create a profile for the student, which includes these test scores, teacher input. There is a student interview that will take place with the gifted resource teacher and other academic achievement information. So once that application is completed, the testing is done, the next step is identification. The Gifted Identification and Placement Committee is made of school personnel who have knowledge of gifted education. This might include administrators, guidance counselors, gifted resource teachers from elementary, middle, and high, gifted assessment specialists, school psychologists, and central office administrators. The committee members thoroughly review all the data on the student application using a multi-criteria approach. With this process, no one piece of information can identify a student for gifted services, and no one piece of information can prevent a child from being identified for gifted services. Based on the information presented, the committee members determine if the student requires gifted services. Students identified for the intellectually gifted program are students who have outstanding abilities, are capable of high performance, and who require differentiated educational programs beyond those normally provided by regular school programs. So I'm going to go over some of the definitions for gifted and talented to help you better understand what it is that this identification committee is looking for. The federal definition of gifted and talented comes from No Child Left Behind. So again, it's those students who need services or activities that are not ordinarily provided by the school in order to fully develop. The Virginia Department of Education uses this definition for identification of students for general intellectual aptitude. Students who demonstrate high levels of accomplishment or who show the potential for higher levels of accomplishment when compared to others of the same age, experience, or environment. Their aptitudes and potential for accomplishment are so outstanding that they require special programs to meet their educational needs. These students will be identified by professionally qualified persons using multiple criteria as having potential or demonstrated aptitudes. The Virginia Plan for the Gifted requires that these areas be met in determining eligibility for gifted programs. Identification is based on multiple criteria established by the school division and designed to seek out those students with superior aptitudes, including students for whom accurate identification may be affected because they are economically disadvantaged, have limited English proficiency, or have a disability. So data should include scores from valid and reliable instruments that assess students' potential for advanced achievement, as well as instruments that assess demonstrated advanced skills, conceptual knowledge, and problem-solving aptitudes. Finally, we are at the notification and placement step in this process. Parents, guardians will be notified by email of the decision of the Gifted Identification and Placement Committee. The email that you put into the application will be the email that they use to communicate with you. You'll also be able to access your child's testing. Once identified for gifted services in VBCPS, students hold this identification in VBCPS until graduation. Students will either be placed at their home school in a resource cluster model, or they will be accepted at Old Donation School. At every school in Virginia Beach, elementary, middle, and high, there's a gifted resource teacher. This person is highly trained and has extensive knowledge of the models and strategies for teaching gifted learners, curriculum development that includes rigor and challenge, and training in the social and emotional needs of the gifted. They model lessons, coach teachers, and are skilled in recognizing gifted characteristics of students. They are the gifted education leaders in their building and serve as the liaison between the testing office, the school, the community, parents, teachers. If you have any questions at all, you can contact me. You can email your teacher can contact me, you can email me. Email is probably the best way right now with us bouncing back and forth a bit this year to home and to school. The gifted testing office is also great at answering questions. They are happy to assist. Finally, we don't really know what the future holds with COVID. The ability to test at an in-person environment, or what changes will be needed to accommodate the situation. The gifted testing office wants you to know that they're doing the best they can. However, we may have to pivot at some point, and it's important for you not to be surprised when this happens. And we want you to be aware that changes to testing procedures may occur for the remainder of this school year. Thank you for taking the time to learn a little bit more about the gifted referral and identification process. And again, please let me know if you have any other questions or if I can assist in any other way.